Everyone was like, "Oh, you should look for alternatives." But to be honest, like evaluating the alternatives, given the same circumstances, is also there's not much that presented itself, and I thought that it was the best decision for me personally. Obviously, it might be different for different people. If you have like a very clear idea of something you might want to work on or might want to build during this time, like obviously it would be a good decision to make.
Like right now, you're at home, but you're taking online classes? Like, what is your school situation?
Yeah, so I'm at home in California and taking online classes. So it's my first year in college, so it's definitely been a little tough in terms of like getting to know people. I'm lucky in the fact that I went to high school where I know a couple kids that are going to Columbia with me, so it's not as completely like a fresh slate. Um, but yeah, it's been an interesting experience starting from home. Um, but I think it for me, I've almost been enjoying it more because I have time to do things like record my own podcast, do things like work my part-time mentorship with Visualize Value. So doing that has been very rewarding for me.
Yeah, I remember because we've had a couple current students on the podcast before, and just playing with this question of should you go to school. I know you had a post about it,
Hmm.
but it was tricky, and you kind of saw the tail half of your high school experience was online school, basically, and a
Right.
lot of failings there. But you still decided to go, um,
Yeah.
mostly for the social value and also to kind of direct you in life. But do you
Yeah.
think, yeah, is there something I'm missing there?
Yeah, I also think that for me, it was just like, what is the alternative? Is the alternative like because a lot of times if you were to evaluate the merits of a gap year, right, the merits would be doing another experience that would probably be outside of this country or if within this country you'd want to like be able to work somewhere that you're not typically in or travel somewhere you're not typically going to and the options for that was just so drastically limited that is it like, would I just drop out and do the podcast full time? Would I drop out to like, I just didn't see any merit to doing it full time because I feel like I could do both just as well while being able to go to college and, like you said, leveraging some of those factors. Everyone was like, "Oh, you should look for alternatives," but to be honest, like evaluating the alternatives, given the same circumstances, is also there's not much that presented itself, and I thought that it was the best decision for me personally. Obviously, it might be different for different people. If you have like a very clear idea of something you might want to work on or might want to build during this time, like obviously it would be a good decision to make. And I think another aspect of my decision was that I realized, right, one of the advantages in a sense of doing this online is that I've over the summer I've spent so much time connecting with different people on Twitter that could be kind of the network I could leverage and use instead in a sense. And yeah, for me, it just made the perfect sense to continue pursuing that path and go in that direction.
So you're saying Twitter using it to complement school, or
Yeah, basically using the people that I talk with on the podcast or people that kind of reach out to just ask me how, like, what my journey has been like and things like that. And me reaching out as well, right? I feel like if you want to get the best out of the people on Twitter, you have to be very proactive in terms of reaching out and trying to learn from those people, kind of seeing it basically as um, your way of networking and making friends.
that's what was so crazy to me. One, the fact that you only started like 4 months ago on Twitter, right? That was your first foray into the Twitterverse, or were you
Yeah.
thinking about it before and you experimented, or this was like starting from scratch right then?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I had a Twitter account before, but I'd follow people like Woj, like Adam Schefter. Like, I wasn't really into like this side of Twitter. A lot of the people that were actually using it to spread like interesting thoughts, interesting messages in that sense, kind of different analysis on different areas. Yeah, so 4 months ago was kind of when I first decided to kind of start following these people and putting out some of my own ideas as well.
Yeah, that's where For me, I always heard the argument with college was like, all right, sure, you're spending a lot of money, but the relationships you build are great and lifelong. And then you see on Twitter, it's kind of like a hack. Maybe it's not as personal per se, but you're getting access to people that are even greater. Even out of Colombia, there's some people on Twitter that you normally wouldn't be able to reach. So there, it's interesting. I guess you have the two running simultaneously, so you get the best of both worlds in that sense.
Yeah.
And we definitely have to go deep on Twitter. But while we're still talking about school, what was like the first, I don't know, I guess 3-4 weeks? I don't know when the semester exactly started, but what's your impression so far of how online college is doing?
Yeah, I think for me it depends on how you go and go about setting it up for yourself, right? If you're just going to not select the classes where the professors are best at online teaching, if you're not going to go out and reach out to different people and be like, okay, let's talk, let's start talking, let's get on a call and get to know one another, let's do homework together. If you're not proactively doing that, obviously the experience is going to suck, right? So in a sense, I'm lucky that I'm not super introverted in that sense, and I feel relatively okay reaching out to different people and being like, hey, let's talk for a bit, or I'd love to learn more. Kind of like following up on different intros like that. Obviously, sometimes it could be seen as weird, and obviously it is a tough balance to put that together. But I think it's very much up to you. I think like you have to like obviously like right now more than ever I feel like the professor makes the class. It doesn't kind of really matter like I mean obviously it matters what the content of the class is, but how your professor is able to teach over Zoom is really different from what they might be able to do in a lecture. And probably advice would be to lean on classes that have either smaller sizes or have a lot of TAs, because it is hard to not feel lost at the very start when it's all online.
Yeah, that's where I'm thinking one TAs are probably more tech savvy than your average professor. So a lot of TAs is good. And it's interesting because you have some of the best in the world at online courses and teaching, and you've taken a couple of the classes like a David Perel or Jack Butcher now. Do you think they should start implementing some of maybe the models? Like, I don't know, would you approach what they're doing differently? Like, should professors be almost doing like interviews, like bringing on some experts in their field? Or because I've been playing around with how I'd restructure college, and some of the best classes where a professor would bring in one of their friends who's in whatever industry it is. I think that's an interesting avenue, but would you make any tweaks to how they're teaching?
Yeah, I'm also still kind of like trying to gather that information, but yeah, I would agree that that model has its benefits. One thing at Columbia, we have Frontiers of Science freshman year that every freshman takes, and that model is a really different take on science. I'm not a super sciencey person myself, so I'm glad for that in that matter. And it's basically like 4 general units, and each unit is taught by a different professor that is very much so at the top of their field. And not even that, but it's very much like casual conversation in terms of I feel like it's almost like someone's interviewing them. We have a Q&A with them every week, which is moderated by kind of the actual professor of the entire course. But having that kind of like you said, conversational ability does make it different in that sense. But I would say it really depends on the course and depends on the class size. I think that certain models are should definitely stay as it is. Like a lot of I feel like the discussion models for smaller classes do pretty well over Zoom. And I think that it's very different, like what Rite of Passage does to what a traditional college experience does, because I feel like Rite of Passage, it's very specifically everyone came to take that one singular course and one singular instructor, and everyone. College is at a steep price, but that price, like you said, college is a really big bundle with a ton of different things. And whereas Rite of Passage, you're paying solely that price just to do that one singular course. So I think if there's a level of difference there that is often hard to translate.
Yeah, I've heard, is it Isaac Morehouse who talks about the unbundling of colleges? I forget who it is, but there's a lot of different approaches to how to restructure all of education. That's why it's cool that you've just had all these different experiences. And for someone like right now, are you 18?
I'm 19.
18? 19. Okay. So literally in your teens, like insane the amount of just content that you're observing and then pushing back to the world.